Snow whipped against Lyra's face like knives. The wind howled across the frozen wasteland, stealing her breath and blurring the horizon into a wall of white. Her small hands clawed at the icy rocks, her fingers numb, but she had to keep moving. Every step felt heavier, every gust a challenge to survival. She had no choice. If she stopped, the storm would bury her alive. A sharp cry cut through the blizzard, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. Lyra froze, heart hammering. It was faint, pitiful, almost human, but wrong. She squinted, trying to see through the snow, and her eyes widened. Two tiny shapes, huddled together in a drift, trembled violently. Their scales glinted faintly, glowing like embers against the gray snow. She blinked. Dragons? Real live dragons? Cub-sized, helpless, and alone. Her mind raced. These creatures were fragile, far from the safety of their kind. The storm wouldn't wait for anyone, not humans, not dragons. Without thinking, she dropped her backpack, grabbed the nearest piece of driftwood, and began scraping away the snow around them. The cubs shivered, weak, their small wings twitching uselessly. Lyra tore strips of her scarf, wrapping them gently around the tiny creatures. It's okay, it's okay. I won't let you die, she whispered, even though her own lips were blue and cracked. A sudden rumble beneath her feet made her head snap up. The snow shifted unnaturally, and a massive shadow loomed through the white haze. A claw, black and jagged, sliced through the air a few feet from the cubs. Lyra froze, fear twisting her stomach into knots. Every instinct screamed to run, but the cubs needed her. She couldn't leave them. Her heart pounded and her fingers shook, but she had an idea. Using the driftwood, she struck flint against a stone she'd found in the pack earlier. Sparks caught the dry brush she had scraped from beneath the snow. Flames roared to life, small but enough to cast a warm glow. The cubs immediately pressed closer, their tiny heads nuzzling her scarf. She wrapped them carefully against her chest, feeling their faint warmth pulse through her frozen fingers. The shadow hesitated as if uncertain about the fire. Lyra's mind raced. She needed more than sparks. Her eyes darted around. A jagged ice formation angled just right could serve as a barrier. With a grunt, she pushed the largest chunk against the cubs, shielding them. The wind tried to steal her balance, tried to knock her into the snow, but she gritted her teeth and held firm. Every second counted. Then a howl erupted, a deep, guttural sound that shook the air. The cubs stiffened, their eyes wide and glowing brighter. The claw retreated for a heartbeat, and Lyra realized with a shock that this was no ordinary predator. Something larger, far older, and far more dangerous had sensed her presence. Her stomach sank, but a flicker of defiance sparked in her chest. She could not fail, not now. The cubs whimpered, and she murmured soothing words, feeling the weight of responsibility press down like the storm itself. I will protect you, she said firmly, no matter what comes. Her voice cracked, but the conviction carried over the roar of the wind. She shifted the cubs carefully into a hollow beside the ice, shielding them further with snow blocks she piled on instinct. The rumble returned, louder this time, shaking loose small avalanches from nearby cliffs. Lyra's heart skipped. Through the white haze, two massive, shadowed shapes appeared. Impossibly large, their scales glinting faintly even in the storm. Dragons. Adult dragons. The cubs stirred, their eyes meeting the shadows above, recognition flickering. Lyra's breath caught. Were they coming for their children or for her? She had no time to decide. A jagged icicle broke loose from the cliff and crashed near her feet, scattering shards across the snow. She pressed herself against the ice, clutching the cubs, feeling their rapid heartbeat against her chest. Then came a sound that made her blood freeze, a low, growling rumble from behind the largest shadow. Something huge, something alive was moving closer, its claws scraping the ice. Lyra's mind raced for a plan, but the storm drowned out rational thought. She could only hold the cubs tighter and hope. One wrong move and they, or she, would be gone in an instant. Then through the haze a third shape emerged. Not like the others. Larger, terrifyingly fast, and intelligent. Its glowing eyes locked onto hers. Lyra froze. Her chest tightened. And in that instant she realized the cubs were only the beginning of something far larger, something she could not yet understand. The wind howled, the snow spun, and the massive shadow lunged toward them, not violently but curiously. Lyra's heart leapt. She had just survived the first test. But what came next would be far worse. Lyra's teeth chattered, not just from the cold, but from the impossible reality in front of her. The massive shadow hovered above the cubs, wings folded, scales shimmering faintly even through the blizzard. It wasn't attacking, just watching. Her mind raced. Could these dragons sense her intentions? Could they tell she meant no harm? The cubs whimpered again, their tiny bodies pressed closer to her chest. She whispered soothing words, moving them slightly behind the ice barrier she'd built. One cub sniffled her scarf and nuzzled her hand. Lyra felt a spark of hope. If she could earn their trust, maybe, just maybe, she could survive this storm and help them. But she had no time to dwell on hope. The wind was picking up and snow swept across the ice in violent sheets, reducing visibility to almost nothing. She shifted the cubs carefully, testing their reactions. The larger shadow above twitched its wings. Lyra froze. Then, with a trembling breath, she whispered, "I'll keep you safe." The cubs shivered, then relaxed slightly, and she felt their warmth spread through her frozen fingers. Small victory. One tiny life saved, maybe two. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed across the frozen canyon. Not from the dragons, she realized with rising dread, but from the ice itself. Cracks spread along the cliff edges above her, jagged lines slicing across the snow. Avalanche. Without thinking, Lyra grabbed the cubs and sprinted toward a rocky overhang. Snow hissed and whipped around her, chunks of ice crashing dangerously close. One massive slab broke loose and tumbled toward them. She dove behind the rocks, barely shielding herself and the cubs. Heart hammering, she pressed them to her chest. The storm wasn't her only problem. Shadows moved at the edges of the blizzard, predators. Sleek, black shapes with claws longer than her arms skidded across the snow. Lyra's pulse spiked. They'd smelled the cubs, or her. Her head spun, trying to calculate. She couldn't outrun the storm and the predators. She had to use the environment, the dragons, anything. Then she noticed it, the cubs' glow. A faint light pulsed from their scales, almost in rhythm with their tiny heartbeats. An idea struck. Lyra quickly scraped snow to form small reflecting surfaces around the cubs using shards of ice and pieces of driftwood. When she tilted them just right, the light from the cubs flashed in multiple directions. The predators paused, disoriented by the flickering glow. Lyra felt a surge of triumph. Her quick thinking had bought them a few precious seconds. But the shadow overhead was growing impatient. Wings stretched wide, snow gusting from each flap, a roar that seemed to shake the storm itself. Lyra realized this wasn't just a guardian, it was a test. The cubs' parents, or maybe something older, were assessing her courage. If she faltered, the consequences could be fatal. Lyra's mind worked faster than her racing heart. She had to move the cubs to safety, but the wind made every step a battle. Carefully, she crawled along the icy ridge, the cubs pressed tight to her chest. Their warmth was the only comfort against the freezing cold, and their soft, uneven breathing reminded her that they depended entirely on her. One slip and the fall would mean certain death. Halfway along the ridge, the larger shadow swooped closer, the roar vibrating through Lyra's chest. She froze, then made a bold choice. She stood tall, raising her arms. "I'm protecting them," she shouted, her voice cutting through the blizzard. Her lips were blue, her body shaking, but she kept her eyes locked on the shadow. For a tense heartbeat, the dragon hovered. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, it withdrew slightly. The message was clear. Courage mattered. Intelligence mattered. Morality mattered. A human who acted with care and bravery could command respect even in the face of impossible odds. Lyra pressed forward, inch by inch, until she reached a small natural cave partially shielded by ice. She laid the cubs down gently, wrapping them in more layers of her scarf and clothing. They stirred, then nuzzled her hand again. A small smile cracked across her frozen face. She had survived the storm, the predators, and the test of the dragon above. Small payoff, but she knew it wasn't over. The blizzard began to die down, revealing shapes moving across the snow in the distance. Not predators this time. Larger figures, silhouettes of dragons, flew low, their wings casting massive shadows on the ice. Lyra's heart skipped. The cubs stirred violently, glowing brighter, their wings flapping weakly. Somehow, her care had signaled the arrival of more dragons. Her mind raced. Were these their parents? Allies? Or something even stranger? Lyra clutched the cubs to her chest again, her stomach twisting. She knew that if she made one wrong move now, everything could collapse. And yet, for the first time, she felt a spark of connection. The dragons were watching, testing, but they were also waiting. Waiting to see what a human could do. Her eyes scanned the horizon. In the distance, one enormous figure broke through the thinning snow. A massive dragon, scales cracked and scarred, wings spread wide like a storm cloud. Its eyes glowed a deep amber as it locked onto her. A chill ran down her spine. This was no ordinary creature. It seemed aware, intelligent, judging. Lyra's heart pounded. She pressed the cubs closer and whispered, "I will not fail you. Not now, not ever." The dragon lowered its massive head slightly as if acknowledging her words. Then, without warning, a third shadow appeared behind it, bigger, faster, and far more ominous. The snow whirled violently, and the ice beneath her feet groaned. The storm had ended, but the real danger, and the real mystery, was just beginning. The storm had passed, but the air still bit like knives, sharp and cold. Lyra pressed the two cubs against her chest, their warmth pulsing faintly beneath her frozen fingers. The enormous dragons hovered a short distance away, silent, watching her with unblinking eyes that burned amber in the pale light. Her mind raced. Every instinct told her to run, but the cubs would never survive on their own, and something about the dragon's behavior made her pause. They were intelligent, curious, waiting. Lyra glanced around the ridge, searching for anything that might give her an advantage. That's when she noticed it, a jagged opening half hidden by ice, a faint shimmer inside that didn't match the snow or rock. With trembling hands she edged toward it, dragging the cubs along. The dragons shifted, following her movements, wings beating lightly against the wind, but they did not block her path. Something told her this cave held answers. Inside, the temperature eased slightly, but the faint glow revealed walls covered in carvings, ancient, intricate, unmistakably dragon in design. Symbols and patterns etched deep into the stone pulsed faintly with an unearthly light. Lyra gasped. The dragons had intelligence far beyond what humans had imagined. She knelt beside the carvings, tracing them carefully with her fingers. The cubs huddled against her chest, their own glow reacting to the carvings, flickering like tiny lanterns. Her eyes widened as she recognized a pattern. The carvings told a story, dragons raising their young but also something more, humans. Figures small and frail, yet holding fire, standing among dragons. The cubs stirred, almost as if sensing the connection. Lyra's mind spun. Humans? Here. And somehow, these dragons had recorded it. A low rumble echoed through the cavern. Lyra's head snapped up, heart hammering. One of the cubs whimpered. The carvings seemed to pulse more brightly, and through the cave's entrance the shadows outside shifted. She realized with a shock, the adult dragons weren't just watching, they were responding to the carvings, to the cubs, and to her presence. Somehow, her care, her courage, was activating a recognition the dragons had stored for generations. Her fingers shook, but she pressed on. Small, careful movements. She had learned that hesitation could mean death. Her eyes fell on a glyph that stood out, a human figure holding two small dragons, arms raised protectively. Beneath it, a line of text, strange but readable, almost like the symbols were designed to be deciphered by someone who truly cared for the creatures. She traced the shapes, murmuring aloud. Protect, guide, bond, the meaning crystallized in her mind. Protect the cubs and the dragons will respond. The cavern walls vibrated softly, as if acknowledging her understanding. Outside, a shadow shifted again, larger this time. The scarred dragon from the ridge stepped fully into view, wings spreading wide, scales flashing in the faint light. Its head tilted slightly, observing her as though testing her. Lyra felt a shiver of fear, but also determination. She would not falter. Not now. Suddenly, a metallic scraping echoed from deeper in the cave. Lyra stiffened. Something else was here. Not a dragon. Not a predator. A human-made structure? She inched forward, the cubs still pressed against her chest. Around a bend, she found a partially buried contraption, old and rusted, wires dangling, panels cracked. Lyra's eyes widened. Someone had been here before, someone studying the dragons. Or perhaps trying to control them. A growl erupted behind her. The cubs stiffened. The scarred dragon had moved closer, nose twitching, wings slightly raised. Lyra froze. Then carefully she set the cubs down and stepped back. The dragon sniffed the air, then nudged the cubs gently with its massive snout. Recognition. Acceptance. Lyra's chest tightened. She had done it. She had earned their trust. But the cave had more secrets. Deeper inside, she noticed a narrow tunnel just big enough for a human. Heart pounding, she crept toward it. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly with the same light as the carvings outside. And there, glimmering in a small pool of ice, was a crystal glowing faintly blue. Lyra reached out, hesitating. The moment her fingers touched it, a surge of warmth shot through her, like the heartbeat of the entire cavern. The cubs whimpered in delight, their glow intensifying. Her mind reeled. This crystal, somehow connected to the dragons. To the cubs. To the bond she had begun. She realized something astonishing. Feeding and protecting the cubs wasn't just survival. It was awakening something larger. The dragons outside were responding not to instinct alone. They were recognizing her as a catalyst, a bridge. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shadow sweeping across the cavern floor. A massive figure emerged from the entrance, not a dragon but something else. Taller, cloaked, humanoid yet alien. Its face was obscured, but its presence radiated power. The scarred dragon growled, wings beating aggressively, but Lyra felt no fear. Her courage had brought her this far. Now she had to act. She stepped forward, raising her hands slowly. "I mean no harm," she said, voice trembling but firm. The cubs nuzzled her again, glowing brightly. The alien figure paused, tilting its head. Then, unexpectedly, it raised a hand and pointed toward the cavern wall, where more carvings glowed faintly. Symbols she had never seen, yet somehow understood. Warnings, instructions, and an invitation. Lyra's chest tightened. Every instinct told her this was a turning point. The cubs' parents or their fleet were watching. The dragons outside, the carvings, even the alien presence all indicated one thing. Her actions here mattered. Every decision, every moment of courage and care, would ripple outward. She understood that fully now. Her heart pounded as the alien stepped back, and through the cavern entrance the dragons moved as one. Hundreds of wings, shadows cutting across the ice, glowing eyes fixed on her and the cubs. The scarred dragon lowered its head, almost bowing. Lyra pressed the cubs to her chest, breathless. She had survived the storm, outwitted predators, earned the trust of 2 cubs, and now, she realized the impossible. She had awakened a force far greater than herself. And yet, as awe filled her chest, a faint rumble shook the cavern floor. The alien figure tilted its head, wings fluttered, cubs whimpered, and Lyra knew with a cold thrill of fear that the real test was only beginning. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the cavern's icy walls. Lyra pressed the cubs against her chest, their small, glowing bodies trembling, but not from fear. They trusted her. That was the one thing she could cling to. Beyond the cavern, the shadows of dragons spread across the frozen landscape like a storm she could neither outrun nor fight. Hundreds of wings, scales glinting faintly in the pale light, moved in unison. The fleet was massive, older, wiser, and far more powerful than she could have imagined. And yet, they were waiting. Her pulse raced. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the human threat had arrived. Figures in armored suits, weapons glinting in the frozen sun, were approaching rapidly. Lyra's stomach twisted. The humans would never understand the dragons, their intelligence, or the bond she had formed. They would shoot, capture, destroy. And the cubs, her responsibility, would die. She had no time to think. Instinct surged through her. She looked down at the cubs and whispered, "We can't let them hurt you. We have to be smarter. Faster." Their tiny heads lifted, eyes glowing brighter, wings twitching. Lyra realized they had begun to mimic her focus, her determination. She pressed forward, ducking through the cavern exit, stepping into the frozen open. The hunters opened fire. Bright flashes tore across the snow, bullets bouncing harmlessly off the ice. Lyra felt the wind explode around her as one dragon, enormous and scarred, swooped low, forcing the attackers to scatter. She shouted commands instinctively, gesturing toward cover, guiding the cubs as best she could. Her mind raced. She had to use terrain, snow, ice, and the dragons together. Every second counted. One predator, a massive mechanical drone, swept in from the right. Lyra grabbed a shard of ice and threw it like a spear, striking the control panel. Sparks flew and the drone screeched, crashing into the snow. Small payoff. She allowed herself a breath. But there was no time to celebrate. The dragons were reacting to her, following her gestures, her voice, her instincts. One flew overhead, shadowing her path, another nudged a cub out of harm's way. Lyra's heart swelled. She realized something extraordinary. Humans weren't just clever, they could inspire trust, cooperation, strategy in creatures far larger and stronger than themselves. Courage alone wasn't enough. Intelligence and empathy mattered too. A sudden roar tore through the air, louder than any she had heard. From the ridge, more hunters arrived, bringing heavy artillery. Lyra's chest tightened. The ice beneath her feet trembled. She had no way to outrun them. One wrong move, and the cubs, the dragons, and she would all be lost. Her eyes darted around. A ridge of jagged ice, a thin bridge spanning a chasm. It was risky, almost certain death, but it could funnel the attackers into a trap. Lyra nodded to herself. She had to act. She stepped onto the narrow bridge, balancing carefully, cubs pressed tight against her chest. Behind her, the scarred dragon hovered, massive wings beating, creating gusts that pushed snow into the approaching enemies' faces. The hunters hesitated. Lyra's small, defiant figure on the ridge seemed to mock them. She whispered, "Follow me, little ones. Stay with me." The cubs twitched their wings and clung closer. At the perfect moment, she leapt, sliding across the ice, using momentum to knock a snowdrift onto a patrol of hunters. They yelled, stumbling, and the dragons swooped, wings beating, shadows cascading across the snow. Chaos erupted. Amid the chaos, one hunter aimed directly at the scarred dragon. Lyra didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, shielded the cubs, and screamed. The dragon froze, its massive body tense, eyes locking on hers. Then, instinctively, it reared back and swept its tail in a massive arc, knocking the attacker aside. Lyra felt the raw power beneath her, and yet the dragon followed her cues perfectly. She realized she wasn't just guiding the dragons, they were trusting her. Another hunter tried to flank her. Lyra ducked behind a pile of ice, throwing a shard at a weak point in his armor. Sparks flew. Small payoff again. She pressed forward, leading the cubs toward the far edge of the plateau. The fleet moved with her, coordinated, wings creating walls of wind, blocking and isolating threats. Every step she took was mirrored by the dragon's actions. The impossible was happening. A human was orchestrating the movements of a legendary dragon fleet. The roar of the scarred dragon echoed across the frozen valley, rallying the fleet. Lyra's heart pounded. She felt alive in a way she had never known. Danger and fear had sharpened every sense. She was cold, exhausted, and yet unstoppable. The cubs flapped weakly, their glow brightening as she encouraged them. Together they were unstoppable too. Then came the pattern interrupt, something she hadn't anticipated. One massive shadow, larger than any she had seen, descended rapidly from the clouds. Its wings spanned hundreds of feet, and its eyes burned an unnatural gold. It was not part of the fleet. Not a guardian. Something new. The hunters scattered in terror, weapons useless against this unexpected force. Lyra froze, holding the cubs tight. The dragons around her stiffened, wings spread defensively. The new arrival circled above, its roar shaking the ice beneath her feet. Lyra felt the weight of everything in that instant. The cubs' fragile lives, the fleet she had inspired, and the humans who now could do nothing but watch. Her heart hammered. She pressed forward. "Stay close. Trust me." The cubs stirred, wings twitching, responding to her voice. The scarred dragon dipped low, wings beating furiously, signaling the fleet to form a protective barrier. Lyra's courage, intelligence, and compassion had carried them this far. But the real test, the impossible, unpredictable threat, had just arrived. She swallowed hard, knowing that the next move she made could decide everything. The cubs, the fleet, and the humans' perception of what courage truly meant. And then, in a heartbeat, the massive shadow roared again, plunging toward them, wings slicing through the air like blades. Lyra tightened her grip on the cubs, took a deep breath, and stepped forward into the open, ready to face the impossible. The storm of wings, fire, and fury was about to break, and she was at the center of it all. The massive shadow circled overhead, wings beating a thunderous rhythm that made the ice beneath Lyra's feet vibrate. She hugged the cubs tightly, feeling their tiny hearts thump against her chest. Their warmth, fragile yet insistent, gave her courage. Around her, the dragon fleet had formed a circle, wings overlapping, tails lashing in unison, their eyes trained on the newcomer. Lyra understood, suddenly, that she was no longer just a human trying to survive. She was the axis around which these legendary creatures had aligned. The massive shadow descended again, this time slower, cautious. Its eyes glowed a deep gold, intelligent and calculating. Lyra held her breath, the cubs trembling in her arms. One step forward, she whispered, "We only want peace. We protect. We care." Her words were simple, but the conviction in her voice carried farther than she imagined. The shadow paused, wings folding slightly, and the scarred dragon she had befriended let out a low, rumbling growl, more of acknowledgement than warning. The humans on the ridge had stopped their advance. Some were frozen in awe, others in fear. Their weapons were useless. Lyra realized how fragile their assumptions had been. That size and firepower alone could control the unknown. Here, in the icy wastes, humans could shine, not through strength but through courage, intelligence, and compassion. She had proven it. Slowly, the massive shadow lowered to the ground, landing with a soft tremor that sent snow spilling from nearby cliffs. Lyra's heart raced as she noticed a detail she hadn't seen before: the enormous dragon boar markings, old scars running along its scales, and yet there was something almost reverent in its posture. It stepped closer to the cubs, sniffed them, and then, as if understanding Lyra's role, bowed its massive head slightly. The cubs stirred, their glow intensifying. Lyra smiled through chattering teeth. Months of care, protection, and courage had led to this moment. Her hands, cold and raw, rested gently on their scales. "You're safe now," she whispered, voice trembling. The dragons around her exhaled warm gusts of air, shielding her and the cubs from the lingering chill of the blizzard. For the first time since the storm, she felt relief, pure and grounding. Then came a small, unexpected reward. One of the adult dragons nudged a piece of ice near her feet. Beneath it, she discovered a crystal, faintly glowing. It wasn't just beauty, it carried a pulse, almost like a heartbeat. Lyra understood instantly, this was a gift. The dragons were acknowledging her bravery, her intelligence, and her unwavering compassion. She pressed her hand to it, and warmth surged through her frozen body. A ripple of energy spread through the cave, faint at first, then strong enough that even the cubs glowed brighter in response. Lyra's mind raced. This was more than gratitude, it was connection. The dragons weren't merely creatures of instinct. They had memory, culture, intelligence. And they had chosen her as an ally. That realization made her chest ache, full of pride, awe, and responsibility. She had survived the impossible, guided two helpless cubs, and gained the trust of creatures that humanity had only dreamed about. Outside, the blizzard had cleared completely. The valley sparkled in the pale sun, ice crystals catching the light like a field of stars. The dragon fleet began to rise slowly, one by one, circling above Lyra and the cubs. She watched, heart swelling, as the scarred dragon nudged the cubs upward, encouraging them to flap weak wings. They lifted, small but determined, and for a brief, magical moment, Lyra saw the cubs fly. Not far, not high, but enough to survive, enough to thrive. Her eyes turned toward the horizon. The humans, still frozen in awe, watched silently. She realized that this moment would change everything. Not just for her, or the cubs, or even the dragons, but for humanity. Humans had been underestimated. Small, fragile, and frail, they had power beyond sheer force. Courage, intelligence, empathy, these were the tools that could shape worlds. She had proven it. Lyra knelt in the snow, the cubs landing back gently against her chest. Tears streaked her face, not from the cold but from emotion too deep to contain. "You're safe," she repeated, almost to herself, almost in disbelief. "We did it. All of us." The fleet's collective growls, roars, and wing beats formed a sound like thunder rolling across the valley, a salute to her courage. Then, as if on cue, one of the larger dragons pointed a massive wing toward the distant horizon. Lyra followed its gesture and gasped. Far across the ice, shapes moved in the sky, another dragon fleet, larger, more ominous. They glinted faintly in the sunlight, wings outstretched, moving with precision and purpose. Lyra felt a shiver run through her spine. This was a warning and a promise. Her adventure was far from over. She pressed the cubs close again. Her chest tightened with both fear and excitement. She had survived storms, predators, and impossible odds. She had guided the helpless, earned the respect of legends, and discovered powers she never imagined. But now she understood, the universe was larger than she had known. There were forces beyond even the dragon's control. Forces that would test her courage, intelligence, and compassion again. As the scarred dragon lowered its head once more, nudging her gently, Lyra whispered, "We'll be ready. I promise." The cubs stirred, their glow bright and steady. Above, the fleet circled, a living shield around her, acknowledging that she was no longer just a child alone in the frozen wasteland, she was a protector, a bridge between worlds. The distant fleet continued moving, their shapes sharp against the sky. Lyra's heart raced with anticipation. The world was full of mysteries, dangers, and wonders. And she, human, fragile, determined, was ready to face them all. The ice beneath her feet glimmered. The wind carried whispers, faint yet unmistakable, adventures yet to come, challenges yet to face, and a universe that would need humans to shine once more. Lyra's fingers tightened around the cubs. She looked at the horizon and smiled through the cold, exhilarated and determined. Whatever came next, she would meet it, not as a frightened orphan, but as a human who could shape the fate of dragons and perhaps the world itself. And far above, unseen, another fleet stirred, wings beating in unison, moving toward a distant land. The next story was waiting, and Lyra would be at its center.